What if your safest choice cost you everything? Moving in with your children might sound like a natural step as we age, something rooted in love, family, and support. But sometimes the very move meant to bring comfort can quietly take away the very things that make us feel alive. If you're in your 70s or even just starting to think about what life might look like down the road, this video may speak directly to your experience. Because for many older adults, the decision to move in with their children feels like the right thing to do. At the time, practical, economical, and emotionally close. But beneath that surface, something deeper unfolds. In this video, we're going to explore 8 specific ways moving in with your children might slowly chip away at your independence, identity, and inner peace. Each one is something most people never talk about, yet millions silently experience. And I want you to stay with me until the very end. Not just because these signs might help you make better decisions going forward, but because they may help you finally give yourself permission to ask for more, protect your space, and feel whole again. Let's get started. Number 1, loss of personal space and identity. One of the first things that disappears when you move in with your children is your own space. Not just the physical room you sleep in, but the sense of ownership over your life and your surroundings. When you give up your home, your routines, and the familiar corners of your day, it doesn't always feel like a loss at first. You tell yourself it's just a change of scenery, a practical shift. But as time passes, you begin to realize you no longer have a place that truly feels like yours. Everything around you starts to belong to someone else. The kitchen, the living room, even the thermostat settings. You find yourself asking before you open a cabinet, or worrying about whether your favorite chair is taking up too much room in a house that isn't really your own. And gradually, a quiet question starts to form inside: where do I fit in now? It's not about ungratefulness or conflict. It's about how space anchors our sense of self. Your home over the years becomes more than walls and furniture. It holds your rhythms, your memories, your dignity. When you step away from that, even for good reasons, you sometimes trade your independence for a sense of obligation. I remember Harold, a 74-year-old man, who moved in with his daughter after a mild stroke. He told me that at first he felt grateful and relieved. But after a few months, he caught himself whispering on phone calls, waiting for permission to watch his shows, and avoiding cooking meals he used to love because they made the kitchen smell too strong. He said, "I used to feel like a man with a home. Now I feel like a guest with a suitcase." That simple sentence stuck with me because it captured something many people feel but can't quite express. And it's not just about pride. It's about autonomy. Having your own space, even a small one, gives you the right to make small decisions every day that remind you that you're still in charge of your life. When that's gone, it can be hard to see where your identity went. You don't stop being who you are, but that voice inside you, the one that says, "This is my home, this is my day, this is my routine," begins to quiet down. And when it does, you start to feel invisible. Number 2, shift in family dynamics and authority. Moving in with your children, can quietly alter the entire structure of the relationship. You go from being the one who raised them, made the rules, and held the authority to someone who must now adapt to their household, their routines, and their decisions. It's not that your children are unkind or dismissive. In fact, they may be doing their best to be respectful. But the reality is, when you're under someone else's roof, even your own children's, the balance shifts. Suddenly, you find yourself adjusting to meal times you didn't set, conversations you're not always part of, and decisions that happen without your input. You may even notice your opinions being gently brushed aside or dismissed altogether. Not out of malice, but out of habit. The same child who once asked for your advice now moves forward with their plans, assuming you'll simply go along. For many older adults, this change feels subtle at first, but over time it creates a quiet discomfort that grows. You're no longer the person people turn to for guidance. You become the person they update after things have already been decided. I think of Irene, a 72-year-old woman, who moved in with her son and daughter-in-law after her lease ended. She was happy at first, grateful even. But as time passed, she started to notice something. Her role in the family had changed. They didn't ask her what she thought about weekend plans. They didn't include her when talking about household purchases. One evening, she sat in the living room while her son and his wife discussed selling the car she once used to drive. They didn't ask, just talked about it like she wasn't there. That night, she told me, "I raised him to be independent. I just didn't expect to feel so irrelevant in the process." This isn't about wanting control. It's about dignity. The authority you once held came from love, responsibility, and experience. Losing that, especially when it happens quietly, can feel like you're disappearing from the inside out. And when your voice starts to fade in the very family you built, you begin to question where you stand. It's not just a shift in roles, it's a shift in respect and in how you see yourself. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Number 3, disruption of long-standing habits and daily rhythms. When you've spent decades shaping your own life, setting your routine, building habits that fit your personality and needs, those small, consistent patterns become more than just tasks. They become a rhythm, a form of self-care, and even a kind of therapy. But when you move in with your children, even the simplest routines can vanish overnight. What time you wake up, when you eat, how you take your coffee, the background music you like while reading, all of it can shift without warning. You find yourself adjusting not just to someone else's schedule, but to a lifestyle that may be louder, faster, or simply unfamiliar. The pace of the household becomes the new tempo, and you try your best to keep up without stepping on any toes. Some seniors adjust quickly, but many don't talk about the quiet stress of having to rewire their days to fit a rhythm that was never theirs to begin with. And even when they do, they often feel guilty for missing things that, from the outside, seem small. I remember John, 76, who used to take a walk every morning at 7 a.m. without fail. He said it was when he felt most at peace, watching the neighborhood slowly wake up, listening to the birds, greeting familiar faces. But when he moved in with his daughter and her family, mornings were filled with chaos, school lunches, barking dogs, quick breakfasts, and a lot of running around. His quiet walk got pushed aside, and when he tried to bring it back, he was told it didn't fit into the morning routine anymore. Eventually, he stopped asking. And that silence, that decision to stop requesting something he loved, was the beginning of a long series of compromises that chipped away at how he felt about himself. What many people don't realize is that these routines are more than habit. They're a declaration of personhood. They say, this is who I am. This is how I live. This is what brings me balance. And when those rituals disappear, so does a layer of emotional grounding. You start to lose not just comfort, but clarity about what kind of life you're living and who you're becoming. And over time, that can lead to a dull, chronic sense of disorientation. That's hard to name, but even harder to ignore. Because the truth is, when your day no longer feels like your own, your life starts to feel like it belongs to someone else. Number 4, loss of financial autonomy and decision-making. One of the most overlooked consequences of moving in with your children is how it can gradually affect your financial independence. At first, it may feel like a relief. You're saving money on rent, utilities, maybe even food. But over time, the very fact that you're no longer managing your own household expenses can quietly erode your sense of control over money. You might start contributing to groceries or paying a portion of the bills, but you're no longer the one setting the budget. And depending on the arrangement, your children might begin to handle things like your prescriptions, bank transfers, or appointments, all with good intentions, but not always with your full involvement. Sometimes these changes happen because you've asked for help. Other times it's assumed. Either way, the end result is the same. You go from being the decision maker to being part of a system you didn't design. This can feel particularly hard when it comes to choices that reflect your values. Maybe you always donated to certain causes or enjoyed treating yourself now and then, but now you hesitate. You wonder if spending money on something unnecessary might seem selfish or impractical in someone else's eyes. I once spoke with a man named Leonard, age 78, who had moved in with his daughter and her husband after a surgery. They insisted on managing his bills so he could focus on healing. But months later, when he tried to order a birthday gift for his granddaughter or contribute to a local charity, his daughter would pause and say, "Do you really need to spend money on that right now?" He told me it made him feel like he needed permission to be generous, something he'd never experienced before. And it's not just about the money. It's about what money represents: freedom, responsibility, agency, the ability to decide how you live and what matters to you. When those decisions start getting filtered through someone else's priorities, you can begin to feel like you're being managed rather than respected. You might start second-guessing your choices, delaying purchases, or even hiding small expenses just to avoid judgment. This slow shift often happens without confrontation. There's no argument, no ultimatum, just a gradual narrowing of your freedom, like a hallway getting smaller each time you walk down it. And what's most painful is that it's often done in the name of love and care. But love without respect for your autonomy doesn't feel like care. It feels like quiet confinement. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Number 5, erosion of privacy and personal boundaries. When you move in with your children, the idea of family closeness often comes with a trade-off that's not always obvious at first: your privacy. Sharing a home means sharing space, energy, routines, and often unspoken expectations. And over time, that closeness can begin to blur the lines that once defined your boundaries. It might start with small things: someone walking into your room without knocking, your mail being opened by mistake, or people using your belongings without asking. These incidents seem harmless on the surface, but they signal something deeper: that your personal space, once protected by the 4 walls of your own home, is now open territory. The toughest part is that you may not feel like you have the right to say anything. After all, you're a guest in someone else's house, even if that someone is your child. You don't want to create tension, so you stay quiet, letting little intrusions pile up until they become the new normal. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from always being on, always filtering your words, checking your tone, or worrying about whether your presence is a burden. And that exhaustion builds over time, especially when you feel like you can't fully relax, even in the place where you sleep. I think of Evelyn, 75, who moved into her son's home after her husband passed. She described how for the first few weeks she loved having people around, but slowly she noticed that she could never find a quiet corner. The television was always on. Kids ran in and out of rooms. Her evening reading turned into helping with homework or babysitting without being asked. She said, "I used to have my little rituals before bed: tea, soft music, journaling. Now I go to bed holding my breath, hoping no one knocks." The lack of privacy doesn't just disrupt your habits. It chips away at your inner calm. It can make you feel exposed, even if no one's being intentionally invasive. It's the sense that nothing you do is truly your own anymore, and that every part of your life now exists under someone else's roof and someone else's gaze. Boundaries are essential for emotional health at any age. They aren't about distance, they're about respect. And when those boundaries dissolve, you can begin to feel like your role in the family is no longer clearly defined. Are you a parent, a roommate, a live-in helper, or something in between? That kind of confusion doesn't just live in the walls. It starts to live in your mind. You begin to doubt your right to ask for space, your right to rest, your right to simply be yourself. And for someone who has lived a full, independent life, that kind of doubt can be deeply unsettling. It creates a constant sense of unease, like you're occupying a space where you're both present and invisible at the same time. Number 6, emotional isolation and generational misunderstanding. Living with your children doesn't always mean feeling connected to them. In fact, one of the most painful realities for many older adults is discovering how alone they can feel even when surrounded by family. Emotional isolation can quietly set in, not because of cruelty or neglect, but because of something much harder to name: generational distance. Your children, no matter how loving they are living in a different world. Their priorities, their daily stresses, the pace of their lives, it all runs on a track that may no longer match your rhythm. Conversations become rushed. Shared meals turn into distractions filled with phones and screens. And the things you want to talk about, memories, fears, reflections, can feel out of place in the noise of a busy household. You may sit in the same room but feel like a visitor from another time. And even when someone asks how you're doing, you hesitate to answer honestly. You don't want to sound dramatic or worse, ungrateful. So you smile, nod, and say you're fine, even when you're not. I remember speaking with Gerald, age 79, who moved in with his daughter after a fall. He said the first few weeks were warm and full of attention, but soon life returned to normal for them. He would sit alone for hours while they worked and ran errands. And when they were home, they were tired, distracted, always on the go. One evening, he shared a story about his time in the Navy, something he hadn't talked about in years. But halfway through, his grandson interrupted to ask for the Wi-Fi password, and the moment was gone. Gerald said, "I wasn't mad. I just realized there wasn't room for my world and their world anymore." That realization that your stories, your wisdom, even your humor, no longer find a home in the place where you live is a kind of grief all its own. It's the loss of emotional relevance, the quiet slipping away of your place in the conversation. And when your inner world has nowhere to go, it starts to shrink. You talk less, you share less, you smile more to cover the silence. Misunderstandings grow not out of arguments, but out of absence. They don't know how you're feeling because you've stopped telling them. And you've stopped telling them because somewhere along the way, you felt they stopped listening. The hardest part, you still love them deeply. You still want to protect them, support them, even cheer them on. But it's difficult to give when you're emotionally empty, and it's difficult to refill yourself in a space where your feelings have nowhere to land. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 6 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Number 7, self-silencing to avoid becoming a burden. One of the most invisible sacrifices older adults make after moving in with their children is the quiet act of silencing themselves. You stop voicing your needs. You stop expressing your discomfort. And you do it not because you don't feel those things, but because you're afraid of becoming too much. Even in the most loving households, that fear can creep in. You don't want to be the reason someone changes their plans. You don't want to disrupt the flow. And most of all, you don't want your children or their spouses to feel like your presence makes life harder. So you swallow your thoughts. You don't mention the noise that keeps you awake. You don't talk about how cold the house feels to your aging bones. You tell yourself it's fine, even when it's not. And at first, this silence feels noble, like you're doing the right thing. But over time, it takes a toll. Because every time you choose silence over honesty, you teach yourself that your feelings matter less, that your voice doesn't deserve space. I remember Elaine, 73, who had always been strong-willed and outspoken. But after moving in with her son and his family, she found herself shrinking. She stopped asking for help with groceries. She didn't mention that the new mattress was hurting her back. When I asked her why, she said, "They already do so much. I don't want to seem ungrateful." That word ungrateful haunts many older adults. It becomes the measuring stick for every complaint, every request, every moment of need. And because you never want to cross that line, you keep quiet. But gratitude and honesty can live together. Being thankful doesn't mean you stop being human. And suppressing your voice doesn't protect your family. It disconnects you from them. This self-silencing becomes a daily habit. You laugh when you want to sigh. You agree when you feel unsure. And after a while, you forget what it felt like to speak freely, to ask without guilt, to be seen in full, not just as someone receiving help, but as someone still whole, still valid. The truth is, your children may never ask you to silence yourself. But if the environment makes you feel like you must, the outcome is just as painful. It becomes a quiet form of self-erasure, not because anyone demanded it, but because love made you afraid to take up space. And that's a loss few people recognize. Because when you stop asking for what you need, you don't just lose comfort. You lose connection with others and with yourself. Number 8, loss of purpose and role within the family. As time passes, one of the deepest shifts you may feel after moving in with your children is the slow fading of your role. The responsibilities you once held, the daily decisions, the small ways you contributed, even the quiet sense of purpose that guided your mornings, begin to disappear. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no announcement, no declaration that your role has changed. But little by little, the things that used to give your life structure begin to fall away. You no longer plan the meals, make the lists, or fix what's broken. You stop being the first person someone calls when they need advice. You become a witness to the family's life, not a participant. This change can feel especially painful when you've spent decades being the anchor, the problem solver, the giver, the one who kept things moving. And suddenly your days are quieter, less defined, sometimes even empty. There's a loneliness in that shift. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from feeling unneeded. I remember a man named Charles, 81, who had always been the one to mow the lawn, balance the checkbook, and fix the kitchen sink without anyone asking. After moving in with his daughter, he tried to offer help, but they often replied with, Don't worry about it, or we've got it. At first, he appreciated the rest. But over time, the lack of responsibility began to gnaw at him. He said, I just want to matter again. I want to feel like there's something I still bring to the table. And that feeling, that longing to be useful, is not about ego. It's about meaning. We are wired to need purpose, no matter our age. And when that sense of usefulness fades, our days can start to feel weightless. Even when your family means well, when they try to make your life easier, they may unintentionally take away the very things that kept you feeling grounded. And when you no longer feel essential, when you no longer have a role, it's easy to start wondering why you're even there. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, aching way. Because without a role, you lose a piece of your identity. You stop seeing yourself through the eyes of who you once were and start seeing yourself through the lens of what's missing. And that, more than anything, is what makes the sacrifice of moving in with your children so complex. It's not about the space, the food, or the routines. It's about the slow disappearance of your place in the story you once helped write. Final thoughts. If you've ever found yourself nodding quietly while watching this video, you're not alone. What we've talked about today isn't rare, and it certainly isn't a reflection of weakness or failure. It's the complex emotional reality that many older adults face when they make what feels like a responsible, loving choice moving in with their children. But love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It doesn't mean fading into the background of someone else's life. You've spent decades building who you are, creating a rhythm, a voice, a role, and that doesn't need to disappear just because your address changed. Each of the 8 experiences we discussed today is a reminder that independence isn't just physical. It's emotional. It's psychological. It's tied to your ability to make choices, express yourself, and wake up each day with a sense of purpose. If you've given some of that up, whether willingly or out of necessity, it's okay to grieve it. It's okay to name it. And it's more than okay to want some of it back. Because no matter where you live, no matter who's around you, you still deserve to feel seen, heard, and respected. You still deserve a space where you can breathe freely and speak openly. So take a moment to reflect. What stood out to you the most? Which of these signs have you felt in your own life? And what do you wish someone had told you sooner? Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.